Get 100% back on services like Netflix, Spotify, and more. Learn how a Visa debit card from Crypto.com can move your household into 2021 while saving you money. Click on the referral link below where available to sign up today and support this podcast. All right, Dan, well, thanks for joining in. You'd reached out to me, and I think it's a perfect fit for the podcast here. You have written and published a book. I found it out on Amazon a little bit earlier today. Capitalism Killed the Middle Class, 25 Ways the System is Rigged Against You. And how long ago did you write the book?
It took me 4 years to write it. It finally got published in March of 2019. And I really feel a need to get it out to the next generation because that's who I wrote it for. So that's why I continue to put the word out about it.
Yeah, the next generation. So if you don't mind saying, how old are you there?
I'll be 66 next month.
Okay. Yeah, I'm tomorrow actually is my birthday. I will be 41 tomorrow. So would you consider? Thank you. Would you consider me the next generation?
Yes, you're on the tip of the. You're on the cusp of the next generation. Let's put it that way. There are people coming up rapidly behind you that are. That's where I'm staking my biggest hope, because they seem to realize that the labor movement is a no-brainer. That they need to stabilize their futures, and that's one way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, even today, just an example. I had a job layoff last year. It was right before COVID hit, and so it technically was not COVID related. The company that I work for, I called it a purge every year, and the purge just happened to hit me, and then COVID hit. But I was very fortunate. I was able to find another job pretty quickly, but it was a contract job. And that company had a 401k, and so I, for tax reasons, got some money into that 401k, but there was some money that even after I rolled it over, some money showed up again. So I was actually calling them today to see, okay, what's this new money, which is, oh, great, it's more money, but now there's another fee to roll that over. So,
exactly.
I worked in banking and mortgages for over a decade during, my work career, and it always kills me to pay a fee or whatever. But, definitely I'm with you there, because I don't think that people really bat an eye when they think about this kind of stuff. But I think you hit on some of these points in your book there.
Yes.
So and also another thing that I thought about when I heard about your book there, I get these emails that people want to reach out and be a ghostwriter for me, and I'm like, I don't know that I have a story, and I feel like I'm too ADD. I tell people that I grew up on Sesame Street, and it's not Mom's fault. Mom was a single mom. She plopped me down in front of Sesame Street. And I feel that it led to me being pretty ADD. I'm kind of a year away from being millennial or whatever, but I don't know that I have the patience to sit down and actually write a book. It's pretty cool it took you 4 years to put that together.
Yeah, my next one took maybe 2 months, but that was a novel. This was a slog, believe me. I started writing as a memoir and realized that to be really relevant to the next generation, I not only had to tell my story, but I had to sort of give them a glimpse of the future, what they were looking at, things like the gig economy, universal basic income, and some of the holdovers from our generation, like the criminal injustice system and the fading middle class. So you combine those together to sort of give them an idea of what's ahead of them, and they can that way be able to react to it in a much more educated, informed manner.
Yeah. And so my mom is just slightly younger than you. She hopes to retire this year, but she's actually too young for Medicare. So this year she will be old enough to draw Social Security, but she's got a couple more years before she is going to be able to draw get Medicare. And so we went to lunch recently for her birthday, because her birthday was this month too. And she sat down and she goes, "I can't figure any of this out. You're going to have to help me." And I just kind of sat there and looked at her for a second. I said, "Okay." So I went out to, healthcare.gov. I did a screen print, sent her a PDF, and she goes, "Oh, well, this may not be too bad." And I said, "Well, yeah, I mean, it didn't take all that much effort." So this is, 41-year-old son talking to 62-year-old mother. But that's just that generational difference. Then I look back at my grandparents who are no longer with us, and I look at the difference in what they had. I remember both sets of grandparents, retiring fully. I remember being able to go to their homes as a child and, again, fully retired. They had all the time. They were able to travel. They had, no money issues, and they were comfortable. I don't know that my mom and dad are in that same financial position.
Yeah, a lot has changed in the years since your grandparents retired. A lot of the social contracts, even pensions, have been turned on their head. And for instance, Detroit, they had all these. The city had all these pensions that they were supposed to fill, and they didn't. They spent the money instead. So when it came time to pay up, there was no more money there, and they reneged on their promise to their workers, and we're seeing so much of that across the nation. There are now more right-to-work states than there ever have been, 27 out of 50, and that is because those the companies within those states and the states themselves realized that there were unfunded mandates that were never going to be paid off, and they just reneged on them.
Yeah, it's truly. So I don't know if you've seen or heard or seen some stories. How are Republicans mostly able to get their base to agree that somehow labor unions are not in their best interest? I don't know if you've come across any stories, or how have you seen that actually come to fruition?
I've actually done lots of battles with people like that on Facebook and otherwise, but it's because they think they have that someday they're going to make it big, and they're going to be able to be part of that special class of the 1%, or at least the top 10%. But they lie. They tell half truth. And one of the things I discovered when I was lobbying in Washington, D.C., I talked to a couple of Republican Congress people and said, "Why are you against unions?" And they were able to go back and say, back earlier in their careers, they had taken a grievance to somebody or just been ignored by a union rep, and that was why that colored their whole perception for the rest of their lives. And I think we owe something to the people that we represent to make sure that we represent them and advocate for them in the best manner that we can.
Yeah. I have an interest in aviation. I tell a lot of people that in a past life or in another life, I would have been a pilot for whatever strange reason. And in hindsight, because aviation kind of ebbs and flows with the economy, I think it would have been maybe a good time to do it when I was actually going through school. But whatever, I work in IT, and it is what it is. But following aviation and my past job, I actually traveled a good bit for work. But I remember sitting next to a flight attendant once. We were landing in New York City. It was, I think, Atlanta to New York City. And we were about to land, and all of a sudden this gentleman, he pulls out a jump seat in the middle of the aisle. I just happened to be in the back of first class. I'd gotten upgraded for that trip. And he sits down, and I was like, oh, well, where did you come from? And he says, oh, I'm actually jump seating. He was a flight attendant. And, we've gotten a really nice conversation with him. And he was an ex-Northwest flight attendant that now works for Delta. And of all places, he was based in Hawaii. I think in Honolulu. And he was part of a very small base of flight attendants that used to be with Northwest. And he actually, we somehow got on the conversation of labor unions. And one of the comments he made, he says, I miss the union. Because when Delta took over, one of the actions they did is they got rid of the Northwest Flight Attendants Union. That was one of the deals they made when Delta took over. And if I'm not mistaken, the only two unions left at Delta Airlines is the pilots union and the dispatchers. Those are the only two labor unions that I'm aware of. There may be some smaller ones that have to do with the ground operations. I have to double check that. But the pilots union at Delta is extremely powerful. And if you look at their political contributions, they actually contribute to both sides of the aisle. I've actually looked through FEC, and the Delta pilots union was contributing to people like Johnny Isaacson, who was the...
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny because a lot of these unions, for instance, PATCO back in the 80s, when Ronald Reagan was running for president, they were saying how dangerous their job had become, air traffic controllers. And Reagan sent them a letter saying, if you help me get elected as president, I will help you. And that's where this whole thing started, where they were not being fired because they were a union. It was because they're... what was the expression they used? They were being permanently replaced. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them a lot of those pilots, I guess, come out of a military background, and so they're already predisposed to being somewhat conservative. And so what they have to realize is that their background is not necessarily going to save them when it comes time for a political decision.
Right. And so, we talked, going back to the flight attendant there, kind of went on a little bit of a tangent, but it's somewhat related. But he was saying that he missed his union because even the conversation that he and I were having right there, even though he was off duty and just, flying to get to the next airport, he says, I could be fired over this conversation right here.
What? Wow.
He said that someone could overhear this conversation. Someone could say something, and he no longer had his union to fight for him. And
that's true, yeah.
and it just and for him to have been so long, and I assume he's still there. He had a lot of seniority. And even the non-union, Delta flight attendants, they have been there a long time, and they have votes, as I hear, that, and they keep on, rallying, and the seniority, the folks there, I think, still keep voting it down, and they have a lot of younger folks that keep joining, and they keep hearing, well, the union's not going to help me out, but it's just this constant back and forth. But it was very interesting. I always go back to that experience and hearing his, standpoint from that too.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but there's this thing that Congress, House of Representatives, has already passed it. It's going to be going to the Senate. It's called the PRO Act, Protecting the Right to Organize. And one of the things in there says that people will not be penalized because they're talking union. So I'm hoping that passes, and we shall see, I guess. The votes aren't there in the Senate, so it may take a while before we're actually able to get it passed. But that's one of the things that will happen with the PRO Act.
Yeah. And it's also interesting your efforts with lobbying. Any other stories that you might have? It's always interesting, just the few stories that I've had over the past couple of years of hearing stories of lobbying and the phone calls that are made and the connections that are had. But any other interesting stories that you might have from your lobbying days?
Well, one time we were trying to get an appointment with a Republican up in Sacramento, our state capital, and she was not returning our calls to schedule an appointment. So we just showed up at the office and said, well, can we meet with somebody? You got somebody available now? They said, nope, sorry, we're busy. And so I went out to their lobby and told some other unions that didn't have people in that constituency, and they said, well, this isn't right. And we all went and we just crowded into the office, and they finally said, okay, we'll meet with you. So I don't know if it actually accomplished anything because they're already predisposed against us, but the fact that we're able to use a little muscle to finally get heard made a big difference to us. And there's been all sorts of things like that. I had some friends in the state assembly, the office of the head of the state assembly, and there was an egregious bill that didn't do anything for labor. It was very anti-labor. And I went to them and I said, have you guys looked at this bill? And they said, no. Do you like it? And they said, no, we hate it. And they said, it's gone. And that afternoon, it was pulled from the list of bills to be considered. So we do get some. Hang on a second.
That's all right.
Sorry, I got a little dog and he thinks he's a big dog, like a lot of us do. But those are the kinds of stories that are important for people to realize. I did a lobbying school. I taught stewards on how to lobby, and I showed them that no matter who you talk to, there's always going to be somebody that's going to be absolutely against whatever it is you're bringing to their office, and you just have to say thank you for your time and move on. And those are the kinds of stories that need to be told, because these people are just regular folks, but a lot of their perceptions are colored by their past or who they associate with. So we need, as union members, to get out there and show the face of labor. So often these CEOs make decisions about downsizing and firing people without realizing who they're doing it to. And we need to make those kind of decisions agonizing for them every single time, because it affects people's lives.
Yeah, and your dog agrees. So what industry did you mostly work in there? What part of labor did you work in?
Telecommunications. We represented the people that work for AT&T.
Gotcha. Yeah, I had a former coworker that, for example, he was out in California. I forget the local telco, but he and I had a conversation one day that he still maintains a local landline because it is a regulated, landline. All of these internets, fiber connections and data connections, they're not regulated like a true, copper landline. And AT&T has no interest in selling those because they don't make any money on them anymore. But he still maintains that copper connection and all that.
Well, also in an earthquake, especially here in California, you need to consider what's going to happen with a cellular tower. They can easily topple over, and even if they don't, their backup battery is only good for a maximum of 4 hours. So you're going to lose any ability to talk to anybody outside your immediate area if that should happen. So that's why the copper line is still important, and that's why we emphasize it, that people need to keep those, even if they're in a back room somewhere, because that will come in handy on that particular day. Yep.
And that has come up as well down in the Gulf of Mexico with the big hurricanes they've had, which have not been helped by global warming and all that stuff going on. But there have been areas that were kind of rural, and there were people that had ditched their landline and only had cell phones. Their batteries had died, and their families had literally no way to contact them.
Another thing, VoIP, the Voice over Internet Protocol, doesn't have the ability to track 911 locations. So if you're calling 911 from one of those types of service, they're not going to necessarily know where you are.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we definitely covered those. But then I guess going back to your book, there were a lot of different topics, and I guess to bring this back to your target demographic, the gig economy. What topics there are in your book that might pique the interest?
Well, I did bring up the Uber situation, but a lot has transpired since my book was published, and we had in the legislature here in California, we passed a law called SB 22 that tried to keep workers from being exploited and called contract employees when so much depended on the company as far as providing the work and a lot of other issues that made it clear that they were employees. And so that passed, but then Uber and Lyft brought this initiative. California has the initiative process where that's been taken over recently by corporations, and they tried to get the law passed that would supersede the legislature's bill and make them contract employees again. And they were successful. They had certain employees, or I should say contractors, who are willing to say that I don't need to be an employee. I like this being a freelancer, and that was passed, and so again they became contractors. The UK has recently passed a law that said that they are not contractors, that they are indeed employees. So at this point, I don't know what Uber and Lyft are going to do other than maybe pull out of the UK.
It'd be interesting to see. I remember when the first wave of the stimulus bills last year, the folks that drove for Uber, Lyft, the food delivery services, they were included, which was ironic to me that you had a Republican-controlled, House and Senate. Well, excuse me. Well, I'm going to take that back. But you had a Republican president signing a bill that was going to give extended unemployment benefits to a group of employees that traditionally never would get that before. That was eyebrow-raising to me, that you had, that party actually going against what traditionally they would do, to cover those employees.
Yeah, that was a shock. Very surprising to me also. But I don't know. That's where pork comes from, too. You try to protect your own.
Yeah, agreed. But it truly, some of the folks that I have encountered that, and this may sound the wrong way. I don't intend it to sound this way, but I've read some stories, news stories of folks that drive for Uber and Lyft, and these different gig economy companies, and they're going to receive a 1099 at the end of the year and be expected to file something like a Schedule C or other income and all that. I don't know that they have the wherewithal to actually, if they're living from paycheck to paycheck or from ride to ride, are they literally, is that all? When all of that money just stopped, when the pandemic hit, and they're expecting that next check to come from, unemployment or the stimulus checks, if there's nothing else literally there to support them. And also, if I'm not mistaken, these 1099 payments, there's no Social Security or Medicare benefits that would be there to protect them someday either.
That's true.
And so the Republican mentality is that, we don't really support, government assistance and we don't, support all these things. It just, you're going to need to educate a population to be able to get there effectively. Otherwise, it's, and I think this is along the lines of where your book is going. It's never going to work, and it's just going to spiral out of control.
Yeah, that's true. It's funny that because Richard Nixon was in favor of universal basic income, and but his people in his office said you can't be for that. That's going to be called Medicare for all, and it's going to ruin your presidency. But not that something didn't come along and ruin it anyway. But that was universal basic income. The idea of it has been around for a really long time. And recently we had in Stockton, California, we had a test of the system there, and they gave $500 extra a month, I guess, to about 500 people, and they found that they were able to dig themselves out of the hole and start saving money again. So it's proven to be a real success here.
Gotcha. The other thing that I've been hitting on, because it is tax season, I think the IRS extended another month on this year's tax season.
May 17th.
Yeah. But I'm actually, ironically, hearing more people getting refunds. And myself, I was shocked. I had to do a spreadsheet to check my own figures. For whatever reason, we're getting a refund this year when we've had to pay the last couple of years. So, we're very happy we put it in the savings, and, we're doing well this year, thankfully. But the tax situation, you've got this huge tax bill that Republicans gave to the corporations and the people that didn't need the tax benefit. And yet, it looks like Democrats are going to try to do something about that. But and while all this is still going on, the debt that we are all incurring is just skyrocketing. I don't know if your book talks on this or if you have any opinions on the tax situation and the debt.
Well, it was a little pressing in some areas, but I don't think that's one of the areas. I do know. Well, actually, no. There's a chapter called "Death and Taxes," and it talks mostly about what's been termed the death tax that Republicans complain about all the time. That doesn't affect anybody that makes less than $1 million a year. But the tax situation is on the backs of the middle class, because the poor don't make enough money to pay taxes, and the rich have found ways to put it offshore. Excuse me. So what we need to go back to corporations and the wealthy paying their fair share. Back in the 50s, when America was doing great, when we had excellent infrastructure, great schools, all of that was due to the fact that corporations were paying a much higher percentage to operate in the United States and in these communities. Dale Carnegie, for instance, helped out his community, and these guys were giants of industry, but they were also a little more giving than the current faceless corporation.
Yeah, and then on top of that, here in Georgia, Republicans have signed a tax cut into law in the middle of all this going on. And guess what? The average cut, it's going to be usually couples about $63 a year that they're going to go back to their constituents and claim that as a victory. I don't know about you, but $63 won't even cover a lot of grocery bills.
So from what I'm told, this money, the money that's been coming out, $1,400 a month, $2,000 or whatever it was going to be taxed later on. So did you get any of that?
No, I mean, we're very, thankful, that we are in a higher tax bracket. We don't need the income threshold. But it's also to be determined, whether that is going to be taxable for those that received it. I have had some friends that did receive the stimulus. They just put it straight into savings. There was also another story. Unfortunately, there are some people that are going out and buying guns with the stimulus.
I've heard that too. just to let you know that I don't know if you knew this, but Bernie Sanders had actually submitted a bill that was supposed to be retroactive back to the beginning of the pandemic to pay $2,000 a month up through the end of the pandemic. And, of course, that didn't go too far. But from what I understand today, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing her name right, but the lady from Minnesota, Tulane, has submitted a bill that's comparable to that. So we'll see how far that goes.
Also, a topic that has come up on a couple of the episodes here, and definitely being from California, would be housing costs. Where in the world and how do we fix housing costs in the middle of all this?
That is a good question, because if you look at the market, there's probably somewhere between 7 to 10 houses in California for each homeless person that lives here. And that's the thing. One of the things we have to do is cut back on the gentrification, and we have to find a way to keep the people who have housing now to actually keep it, because we don't need more homeless folks out on the streets. And I think homelessness is part of that. It's a example of housing not working and our economy not working. And a lot of people really think capitalism is the end-all to end-all, but I'm just wondering why occasionally we have to have socialism step in and take care of these situations. But George Carlin once said that we should take all the homeless and close down the golf courses and let them live there. But I don't think that's the answer either. I think that we need to find a way to, in places like California, especially the Bay Area, which is very expensive, one of the most expensive places to live in the world, we've got to find a way to subsidize that. And maybe we could do that through grants or things like that. I guess there's a couple of bonds being floated here in California that are supposed to help with the building of housing that will incorporate businesses below and the housing above. And that's proven to be a good situation, good answer to some of the problems that we have with density and housing. Because density is another problem that deals with housing, because that's why so many people in California live in apartments, because that's the only place they can actually afford to live. And that affordability has got to be tackled. And like I said, the situation is subsidizing and the building of these housing areas that are built for both business and folks to live in.
Yeah, certainly. May have lost. See if he dials back in. Gotcha. So, I caught the last end out of the housing issue down there. Will, that co-hosts with me when he's able to, I've tried to get him to join us today, but he is busy with work. He works for I'll call it a large tech company based in the Bay Area. But he was in the Bay Area, and when the pandemic hit, he got approval to work remotely from anywhere. So he has relocated to Texas, mainly because of the housing cost. It did not make any sense for him to stay in the Bay Area and pay that huge cost of living when he could, relocate to Texas. And we've had, already he's in Austin, Texas, and he's already had to deal with the power outages and all that drama since he's gone back to Texas. But it's the pros and cons of, living in red Republican Texas and dealing with all that versus everything that, came with living out in the Bay Area. So
I actually grew up in along the Gulf Coast in a small town in Texas called Palash, and that was during my poor period, and I never want to look back, because it was it was my way or the highway kind of atmosphere there, and it was not conducive to somebody like me who I guess I was born progressive or liberal. I'm not sure.
Yeah. It looks like you also have 2 sequels, Rebuilding Union, Capitalism Kills, and the Global Edition. Working on those?
Yes, I am. The Capitalism, the Global Edition, compares and contrasts 4 countries, Morocco and Thailand, because I've been to both of those, and Norway and France. Norway because year after year after year, this UN report comes out that shows how income equality and things like that, and how they treat their workers. And that's what I'm trying to show, what works and what doesn't work as far as taking care of your middle class. And that's what I'm comparing and contrasting. France has been a victim of their own success, and there's the density of union members has dropped significantly. And what they're suddenly realizing is that means that they have less leverage with the government of France, and we've encountered that a long time ago. So we're kind of aware of that, and but using those statistics, that's what the other book is about: is taking what we've learned and from ourselves and from other countries, and finding a way to rebolster the union movement so that it empowers more people and includes more people, because a lot of Republicans, I guess you could say, are the ones that said, you're a white-collar worker, why do you need a union? And a lot of people said, yeah, you're right. Why am I paying all that money to a union when I'm this glorified paper pusher? And what they have to realize is that we're all in this together. And labor movement, the whole premise of my book is that the labor movement can be the salvation of the middle class in the United States.
Yeah, for sure. And this reminds me, especially if this is going to be a global focus, a lot of people have not done this research. There is you can Google this information, average India IT salary. So someone who works in IT, technology software in India, can have a salary range of somewhere between 390,000, it's a wide range, 390,000 to 1.8 million rupees. So that's the Italian, not Italian, Indian, currency.
Right.
But when you do if you just do a simple conversion of 1 million rupees to U.S. dollars, that's just over $13,766.
Yeah, I don't know how to live on that.
Yeah. And so that is the competition that these other countries are wielding against U.S. workers. And so that's where the labor unions are. That's one of the huge, battles that these labor unions have to wage, especially with these technology jobs. I know that Google has decided to form, a labor union, and that's probably one of the things that they're up against there. Because as you say, white collar workers, the excuse, why do you need a labor union? But that could be something that they have to look at.
Yeah, I actually talked to a government worker in Mexico, and their minimum wage is 50 cents an hour.
Yeah.
How can you compete with that?
Yeah. So, and then the other side of that, if Republicans don't want to raise minimum wage here, but yet you allegedly want to bring jobs back to the U.S., how are people going to pay for the higher labor here?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Henry Ford even realized that in order to be able to sell more cars, you needed to pay your workers a decent wage so they could afford to buy one. I don't know where this crazy circle game is going to end. It's we call it in the labor movement a race to the bottom. Chinese people have started making enough money to where they can actually travel and live a middle class existence. So what happens? You move your operations over to Qatar or Bangladesh or someplace where they don't have those worker protections and decent wages, and then you start all over again. And so I don't know what the answer is, but I know that a lot of people here in the United States think that we have to protect our jobs and our jobs, and to hell with the rest of the world. And I don't know if that's the right answer, or if there's something that lies between that can protect all workers everywhere.
Yeah, it is a constant battle for sure. All right, any other parting words? Anything about the book or any other parting words that we missed?
Yeah, actually, are you aware of the Powell Manifesto or the Powell Memo?
I saw it listed here. I did not get a chance to research it, no.
In 1971, Lewis Powell was a judge, and a friend of his that worked for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce said, we have to stop these Vietnam protesters and dirty hippies from talking bad about big business here in the States and take back the conversation. And they asked him to write a memo about how they could do that. So what he did was he created a blueprint that showed how they could take over the conversation in schools and colleges and think tanks and things like that. And it worked so well that Nixon was so impressed, he appointed him to the Supreme Court. And his previous notoriety had been fighting for the tobacco companies to say that smoking was not addictive. And so every Republican president since Nixon has adopted these policies. Reagan made copies of them for his staff so that everybody would be on board with the blueprint and the priorities of his White House. And even Donald Trump followed a lot of the issues that were brought up in the Powell Memo. And what I recently did was I gutted the Powell Memo and took all the words business and capitalism out and put in democratic socialism, progressive, and labor, and I sent that to the head of the AFL-CIO.
Did you get a response?
His special assistant said, "Thanks for sharing this. Keep on dreaming."
Yeah. That's interesting. I found a link. It looks like Greenpeace actually has a decent write-up on it. I'll include a link in the show notes here.
Okay. Yeah, I'm waiting to see if there is going to be any more feedback on that. I'm working with the Democratic Socialists of America now to try to implement some of that, because I think that the way the labor movement is going to work to save the middle class and to adapt to the future is by working from the ground up. Yeah,
because as we know, trickle-down economics, that doesn't work either. So.
No, it's been found not to work. And there's also something else I wanted to bring up was the 1033 project. That's in my chapter about the Department of Defense. To fight the war on drugs, they have a mandate that the Department of Defense sell some of their surplus military goods to local law enforcement at bargain basement prices. Now, LA Unified School District owns 2 grenade launchers. They had a MRAP, which is a vehicle that's supposed to be able to be impermeable to landmines, and I think 47 more than 20 AK-47s. And what they were going to do with all this stuff, I don't know. You're talking K through 12. I don't understand the thinking behind Project 1033 and why these institutions of higher learning or even basic learning need that kind of firepower.
So the school district, you said, has a grenade launcher.
2 grenade launchers, yes.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Exactly, especially if you haven't been trained to use them, and some situation comes up like we have a school shooting or something like that. Of course, that never happens these days. Then those weapons could end up hurting the wrong people. And I just think this whole thing leading from the war on drugs over to this militarization of law enforcement needs to be really looked at again to see what the common sense answer should be.
Yeah, and not only that, but also these, the mass shootings have become back in the press, unfortunately, again. And there was an idea that I found through some friends on social media. So I believe in California, just like Georgia, you have to have, or you're supposed to have, liability insurance on your car if you drive.
Exactly.
So we've already been warring with this about healthcare. So why is healthcare not a given? So maybe that's a little bit out in left field. But what about guns? So your mortgage company makes you have, home insurance, but they're more worried about the place burning to the ground. They're not worried about your liability. So why don't you have to have liability insurance if you choose to own guns?
Makes sense to me. We could eventually get rid of the NRA if they, they're already on the ropes, I guess, as far as funding goes, but this would really put a nail in the coffin as far as the pro-gun movement if we had liability insurance on all those weapons. And it makes perfect sense to me that we would want to have liability insurance because of all these accidental shootings in the home and things like that, there are grievous situations that really need some kind of common sense answer.
Yeah, and I did the looking up the numbers. The number of people killed in vehicular accidents is about the same number of people killed in gun accidents and gunfire. So, but yet cars, you have to have insurance, but not with guns.
Right.
Go figure that one out. So.
Yep. Cool.
All righty. Any other topics for this episode?
No, not that I can think of. I'll get back to you on my novels later. I don't know if you guys really cover that sort of stuff, though.
Yeah, these are definitely relevant. For the main topic here, like I said, you spent some time in Texas, and Will is from Texas. He named the podcast "Goddamn Liberals" because we live amongst a lot of red Republicans around here, and they just, if they can't explain something, we're just a bunch of goddamn liberals. So that's where the name from the podcast came from. So.
I remember what it was like living down there, and like I said, I think I was born a liberal or progressive because I just didn't fit in.
Yeah, we sometimes fit in that mold as well. So. Also, if you think about it, I will publish this over to Spotify. It lets me put a song in front of the episode. So if there's a particular song you think about, I will publish that with a song over there too. So.
Well, there's always "Get Up, Stand Up" by Bob Marley.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'll put that in the fight. What is it? Fight for Your Rights? Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, that'll be good. We'll put that on Spotify there.
Excellent.
All right. Well, I appreciate the time there, and good luck, and have a safe trip down to Mexico. Did you get both of your vaccines in?
Oh, yeah. I got my second one yesterday, so I won't be fully covered by the time I get on the plane, but what do they say, a week or something like that?
Yeah, I think 2 weeks after the last one, you should be okay. But even the folks that I've heard that have been down to Mexico, they say they're being pretty safe down there. So I think it'll be fine.
Okay.
But we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel finally. So I think it'll be good.
Yeah. Well, next time we'll talk about my Parkinson's in my book or my novel.
Yeah, looking forward to hear about it.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
Tim.
you so much. Take care.